Dr. Cordova is a woman of first. She's our first speaker of the year. She's the first woman to receive a doctorate of musical arts in the English horn performance from the Juilliard School, and the first female president of Aquinas College. And so please join me in giving her a very warm welcome to Dr. Alicia Cordova.
Okay, here we go. You're going to hear a lot of my story. Some of it is because I wasn't quite sure how far to go back. Do you start with your professional world? Do you go through academics? So I'm taking you all the way to the beginning. Because when I was, discerning what to say in this presentation, some of where I have come to at this point in time, being your president here, actually was beginning from the very beginning. So one thing that I invite you to do as you listen, I'm an ardent believer in patterns. And I have pointed them out. I went through and did that process myself and noticed things that were consistently coming up over and over in my own life. I will point some more out to you, but some of those things you'll find for yourself as well. So the picture on the front is not me. My story begins with my parents. They're an incredible couple. Totally different, but I always refer to them as the glamour people. Beautiful couple. My father was, actually I'll go to the next slide, kind of tell you. My dad was from Sevilla, España. My mother was from farmland, USA. She was from the farm country of Illinois. So you couldn't get people from too far different backgrounds coming together. But the uniqueness of their relationship is what all of us kids grew to become. So this image here is kind of walking you through my childhood and youth. I kind of broke my life down to all these different sections of how things happen. So I was born in Illinois, just like a lot of us suburban Chicago types. Completely grew up there. My dad actually met my mom in Spain. She was, and this is again part of my story, she was a teacher in the military. She was working on her doctorate at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. Had just about finished, all the courses and was about to do the dissertation, got kind of tired of being at school, like a lot of doctoral students are, because they've been in school for a long time. She says, I need an adventure. Saw on a bulletin board an ad to go teach for the military and found herself on a cargo plane going to Newfoundland. Again, part of my story. While she was there, she also found out she could travel to Spain to go teach there and then travel through the Middle East. So they'll see different pictures of her that pop out in some of those adventures of hers. Again, my life, you will see, has a lot of that through it, and a lot of me stems from my father. If you just look at my eyes and my nose, I'm an exact replica of my dad and his father. I'm a rdoba, through and through. Temperament and everything. So anyway, because my dad was from Spain, we did a lot of traveling. He also believed every year we should always take a family vacation. So I've been all over the United States, mostly towards the East Coast, and then we went to Spain almost every other year throughout my childhood. So I've been there at least 20 times over the course of my life. And for long periods, some shorter, some couple weeks, some full summers. Mostly because of my family, and I'll show you later on how I continued that pattern because I always found other people to pay for it because I could never afford it. I was an oboe player, as you remember, and I also have worked my entire professional career in Catholic higher education. So again, we all know what that's about. Anyway, so there was a lot of music going on because my mom decided that all of us should at least through high school play an instrument. She was a clarinet player and played through high school, so each one of us did. So you see me down there, I'm actually the one playing the bells because I couldn't play on the oboe and I was so stubborn, I want to be in it. So the band director said, if you want to play the bells, that's fine. Well, that thing weighed about 60 pounds. Again, my story. I'm stubborn, as well, a lot of you have already learned. I refused to give up, so I played those bells even though I fell over cars all the time because I couldn't see past them. But I learned how. My story started, as you said, I have pictures. That one on the, I guess your far left, is my mother. And that little baby asleep on her lap is me. That's one of my favorite pictures, and I have it at home up, in a collection of family pictures. I like looking at it almost every day, and I have almost my entire life had that picture so close. It also brings me to where I am today, because that's the Michigan Dunes. My love of travel started at a very young age. My first passport picture is right next to it. Because again, we went to Spain. My family wanted to meet this little new girl because, my dad and his little, as he called me, his little Ali. I was Alicia, but I was his Ali, which I think is interesting. We have Ali here too, is that name. No one else was ever allowed to use that nickname for me, so don't start. But he always did. I was his little Ali. And again, there were 4 kids. We were always hanging out. You'll notice kind of consistently through the pictures, I'm often the one kind of looking afar because I was always lost in my head. Spain, then obviously, was really important to my family, and it became so much a part of my being and soul. For one thing, every time I get off the plane over there, my family has asked me to completely flip to speaking in Spanish. I'm not allowed to speak in English. Headaches all the time from that. I'm trying to make that shift really fast because I don't speak it a lot all the time, but I do that for them. They don't mind my broken language and you doing the present tense for every single thing that I say. But I love all the customs, I love the smells, I love the food, and I particularly love the attire. So that one picture right here is near where my grandparents lived, right smack dab in the center of Sevilla. And so there's my little sister in her flamenco dress, and there's me, of course, the Spanish woman, immediately the Olay pose. And every time I think about it, I can't help but do the same thing. Down at the bottom is me with my grandparents. Again, my sister and I, this is during Holy Week, or La Semana Santa, which is an incredibly important week in Spain. And we visited churches in the attire of the women. So you do a decade of the rosary at each of these different churches, wearing the mantillas, as we called them, radar heads, because they were so large on our heads. But my grandparents were so proud of us for doing that ritual with them. And my sister and I each had to have a male sponsor. So my father actually took my sister, and mi tío Carlos, who's also my godfather, mi padrino, took me. But I love this picture because it shows the love my grandparents also had for these 2 American children. And of course, this up here is my family with I wanted to make sure my American grandparents, my mother's parents were also seen because they were instrumental a lot in my faith practice. And just being around them all the time. I helped them when I first finished a lot of my education and my travels until I kind of settled and got married and so on. I would go make sure they were okay all the time because I love them and they had these great stories. It's totally different. But one of my favorite pictures up there is that girl with the green jacket. That is the epitome of how I see myself. Just always right there, but always in a state of contemplation, constantly in my head, thinking about stuff. What I particularly like about that picture is, again, that's at the dunes. So I start at the dunes, and we constantly vacationed at the dunes. But that particular trip, that butterfly came to my shoulder every day. It would leave when we went in the camper where we slept. When I come out in the morning, it would fly to the same shoulder every day for a week. So I was like, there's something going on here. You know that love of creation? Mm-hmm. Right there. God's telling you something. So anyway, college and graduate school. I love jazz. I don't know if any of you have such a passion for music, but I'm an oboe player. Why do I love it? And I wanted to be a jazz oboist so badly. And I found out there are a few out there, and I eventually learned how to do that. I even put a group together when I was at Benedictine University called the Benedictones. In part because I didn't have enough money to go to the scholarship galas, so I bartered a group into play for receptions in order for us to sit at tables and eat, be at them. So we did that for 3 or 4 years. Again, a gift of entrepreneurship that I tend to have. I need something, I have no money, how can I get what I want and give somebody else something in return? Ding, 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 the Benedictones were created. But even before that, I was at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And I went there, actually, believe it or not, I really didn't care to go to college. I didn't want to go. Why should I go to college? Which is really interesting that now I'm a president. How does that even happen? And but I knew a bunch of these jazz players that had actually, the band from that school played at my high school. I said, well, I know friends there. I know these people because I had become pen pals with them. So he said, notice that first slide, I do a lot of writing. And I used to write a lot of people because I liked to receive the letters. It made me feel good. And I had lots of friends in a lot of places. And I did that with a lot of family. So I knew them. So I was like, you know what? I know these people. I'll go. Well, every day that I was at college there, I went to their rehearsals and did my homework every single day for 4 years. Until, well, actually 3 years, until the last year, their band director, who was a huge name in the jazz world, said, you know, why do you keep staying over there? Why don't you come up here? So he actually invited me to be a soloist with their #1 jazz band. And so talk about being an anomaly, going on stages to the top 10 jazz band shows around the Midwest and having a jazz oboist stand at the front of the band. It was a really cool experience for me and a very unusual one. But also showed that kind of always music is around and always somehow just saying yes to opportunities with how they can develop things later on in life. I did start out, and a lot of you do not know, as an accounting major. And sorry, some of these pictures have shifted up. I started out as an accounting major there, which at the time was the #1 business school in the country. And I didn't like being a Social Security number. I was only a number there, and I missed my music. Even though I was in the band, it was not the focus anymore. And so, again, jazz importance. I went to a jazz concert. I can't think of the drum. Buddy Rich. I don't know if you know him, but he's an amazing jazz drummer. And I heard him play, and I remember sitting in the audience going, I want to do that. Not play the drums, but be up on a stage with that excitement and the enthusiasm and joining in an audience. And one of my friends asked me, then why aren't you? And that was the first time somebody made me question that. Because my band director said, you know, you want to party too much. Just revealed. You don't have enough discipline, and you should never go into this business. Side note, I got my doctorate before he did, so somehow I found my discipline. But it made me question, like, why aren't I? So that was, again, that moment in time, that listening to my friends saying that question and making me like, yeah, why aren't I? And there it led me all the way through this incredible musical life, going in from business to music ed. I tried to say, well, people say it's more apt to get a career, and I'm like, I'd love to play. I learned how to play the trumpet that semester, and I get, yeah, maybe I should be a trumpet player rather than oboist. But my love of oboe playing overtook that, and I realized I don't want to be a director. I want to be in the center of the sound. I want to be in that experience. So I literally went all the way through the DMA. And again, that took me from the middle of the cornfields of Illinois to New York City. What a treat. Oh my goodness, what a gift. And you know the movie Fame? My locker was in that hallway. I saw the theater people talking to themselves, the contorted bodies of the dancers, and then the music that you could hear wafting from the rest of the building. It was the most incredible experience. I found out often when some of the biggest superstars that were faculty there would eat lunch, so I'd find my way to have a cup of coffee with them. So I had amazing conversations. It was all right there on a platter. It was also, while I was there, I'm actually almost skipping a few of these things. I did have an opportunity to go to Spain. The Conservatorio de Madrid did an exchange program. I guess that was between my master's and my doctorate. And it was literally to go have 2 weeks of exploring Spain on the government's budget. So it was free. It was entirely free for us. And then we were also having lessons every day and playing in ensembles, and then we toured the whole country performing. What a gift. Austria happened right before I went to Juilliard. This Ames Festival allowed me, again, I find ways to go back to Europe as much as I can. So I went there to perform with an orchestra, but also went and visited my family for a couple of weeks right after that trip, which led me into Juilliard and the Trenton Symphony and the Museum of Modern Art, all these things while I was in New York. I was principal oboist of the Trenton Symphony because I happened to go to Austria. The conductor of that organization, of the orchestra there, happened to be the conductor of the Trenton Symphony, and their principal oboist just happened to go on sabbatical, so guess who was asked to be the principal oboist? Travel, just happened to be in the right place, be prepared, do good work, and be a nice person. And it all kind of ends up coming right back at you. Obviously, music is spread throughout that. Some of those images are the one on the top is the School of Music of U of I. The Cranert Center still remains part of my musical career, although I'm sad to say, because I took this job, they decided I was too busy, so I'm no longer their principal English horn player, so I'm giving that up because I love all of you. My dad is in this particular picture because, I mean, we were like twins, my dad and I, although I don't have hopefully not quite the temper he had, but he was how I learned my business. My mom did not want to sit with him talking. She had other kids to take care of, and I loved hearing him talk about his interactions with his colleagues. So I spent most of my youth, all the way through college, listening to my dad talk about his business. And so I learned a lot about what you do and what you don't do, and the things that give you joy in that world, the world basically of administration. He was the president of an international electrical construction company. He was the one to make sure everyone else was taken care of. So he was a true servant leader, and he found ways of then bringing his love of travel. He had been all over the world, but finally based in Barcelona, where he had an apartment, in Saudi Arabia, where he had another apartment, and then our home in Illinois. So I want to be like that guy. Again, my influences. And of course, Juilliard. I mean, how cool is that building? Anyway, Museum of Modern Art was also one of those things where, take advantage of a moment. I worked a lot with all the conductors and composers while I was at Juilliard, always doing original things. I had a background in contemporary music from the University of Illinois, and most of the oboists and English, well, I was the only English horn player for most of my time there. Didn't really appreciate that music, and I just had gained the skill because I wanted to play, and nobody else wanted to play that music, so I'll learn how to do it, why not? So I got to be working with one of the greatest superstars there, running their summer music concert series. So and of course that meant I get to play all the time. So my music, taking advantage of the moment and making things happen, and my travel, and always doing things back for other people. One thing, before I left New York, I felt so guilty about how much I was intaking that I tried to figure out how I could give it back. So I helped them create a program there, which I believe is still going on, is how students can do benefit concerts for other organizations. So I was there, I put one on for Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, Children's Division. So I went and visited it. They were like, no one has ever done this before. Juilliard had never done that before. And even the president, while I was there, said, I wish we had more students that were not so much involved in the practice room entirely, but also were willing to give. I said, well, I'll give you what we did. So I gave them their platform. And so students are now always doing all kinds of things for other people. Servant leadership has become a cornerstone of Juilliard because of some of that stuff. But some key things, if you notice, we're writing this word crises because my life, all of us have like those moments, transitional things, where I kind of skip by my first crises, which is also very much a part of what I become, and things keep happening, and I notice they always go back to the original crises. When I was 4 years old, I had a temperature that went off the thermometer. They have no idea how it went, and it was there for a week. The doctors don't know how survived it. I was, 4. I should not have, and I should have had entire brain damage, if not death. It's, again, miraculous. And you'll notice that comes in. You'll see how God is present in my life entirely. I never really noticed the repercussions of that until I got to college, exactly, because I was sickly all the time. So I just figured it was part of that. But it wasn't until I got to the University of Illinois when I realized a couple of things. And some of you will notice, if I get to the afternoon and I start falling asleep, I cannot stay awake in the afternoon. I don't care how hard I try. But I was in classes, you have to stay awake. So I remember having an American history class that, it's really hard to not zone out anyway, and I had that in the afternoon. And I'm like, oh, for heaven's sakes, who was thinking this schedule? So I played a game with myself to try to figure out how not only to stay awake, but to make sure to remember all the material. So I learned how to write word for word what people were saying, because you have to write really fast. So it was a mechanism. And I realized if I wrote, I would remember things better. And then if I would rewrite those with colors, I would remember them even more. And then by the time I would take tests, it would just be, my brain was just writing this stuff on its own. So I overcame this weird thing that was happening in my head, because I started realizing then as a faculty member, I couldn't remember what I taught from one semester to the next. I had to reteach myself the material every year. every single year for about 5 or 6 years until it became a pattern. And I was thinking, how does one even get through college? How does one become a professor? And how does one do, but you figure out your own patterns and you figure out ways to overcome them. I was doing that my whole life. I just didn't notice I was doing them. They just became a natural path. So that was one of the things. The other spiritual musical thing that happened to me when I was in New York was that I lost my ability to play. So nothing like being a doctoral student and not being able to play the instrument that you were brought to Juilliard to play. Gone. I thought it was the instrument. I had somebody else play it, played fine. I thought it was my reeds. I had somebody else play those. They could play them fine. I was playing duets with a freshman when it came and hit ahead, and I'm a doctoral student, remember. We're playing duets, and I couldn't get sounds out of my instrument. He says, how did you get into Juilliard? Nothing I could do would make it come back. And so I just asked God, and I realized what had happened. I spit a gift in the face. I finally say, oh my gosh, I must be good. I am at Juilliard. And God said, that's not why you're here. I believe, and to my nth degree of my being, and I'll explain why in a second, that he took it away because he brought me there for a purpose, for those things that I said that I did while I was there. And so I turned around and made it about me rather than about the gift. And so I apologized with all of my being and said, if you can please at least not let me have that experience again and just let me hide in the background. And I promise I will just not come back and after the semester was over. And I promised him that I would never do that again. Well, not only did my playing come back, it came back better than anybody, anywhere. I'm not just talking to Juilliard, anywhere. My oboe playing was better than anybody else's. My English horn playing was better than anybody else's. And my oboe d'amore playing was better than anybody else's. And I'm not even saying that because it's an ego thing. After a big concert I got to play that I kind of absolutely requested to do because they were playing a piece of music, was why I wanted to be a good oboe player. And I had at least one of the composers that I used to have coffee with come up to me and actually hand me a piece of his music. He said, if that's really how you play, I want to give you a gift of my music too. I had the president or director of Juilliard running after me after a couple days after the concert and saying, Alicia, I want to talk to you. I'm like, oh my goodness, you're the president. What do you want? And he said, I knew you could play English horn really well, but I had no idea you could do oboe like that. That was just incredible. It was just, and this was after not being able to play anything. Total gift. And I have kept that mantra still to this day. I give him everything. And I'm still absolutely terrified of going anywhere because I never quite know when he's going to teach me another lesson. Because that was really terrifying to be at Juilliard and not be able to play. So cool. Not only did he give it back, but it made me realize how important my faith was to me at that point. So the fun begins, and I'll try to talk quickly because I know I'm talking way too much here. But life completely flipped then after that. My early career was taking me to amazing places. And some of it actually began by not being, some of it's the music. So going from New York to Chicago was an interesting phenomenon. I didn't realize how hard it was to break into a new city when you were nobody. I thought, my jazz friends will help me in. Well, they're in jazz. I'm in classical music. So that really didn't work. So I did a lot of auditioning, and I got to do a lot of freelancing. But the key things that really helped me get somewhere were being in the Civic Orchestra, which is a training orchestra for the Chicago Symphony. And because of being in that, and everybody watching my absolute passion for playing, it wasn't just I wanted to be a good oboist. I love playing. And people saw it, and just by timing or God's goodwill, that the English horn player in the symphony was about to retire and had then asked me for about a year and a half to go in and play either whether there was 2 English horn parts or in his stead. So there were a lot of times I'm playing as a solo instrument with the Chicago Symphony going, what happened? How did this happen? It just happened to be doing good work, making sure people know you're there. And I even had, I don't know if you know the name Daniel Barenboim, but he was the conductor of the Chicago Symphony. I was playing, I don't remember, it was Civic or doing some rehearsals with the Chicago Symphony, and he asked me to go after a rehearsal to his dressing room and talk to him about some things. I said, okay, this is creepy, but I'll go anyway. A lot of people around. And he said, why are you not in my orchestra? that's the level at which God let my playing be. And of course, here's me. I don't know, you tell me. And that was the end of that conversation. Anyway, I did a lot of freelancing, and I did a lot of temp work. I mean, my temp work really, I was a office assistant, so I got to work for a phone company. I got to work for a lot of other offices in town. My favorite thing was working for the Board of Trade. I was in the investigation and audits department. So when all the insider trading was going on and the bomb threats were going on, I was in that building in the subfloors. It was the coolest experience ever. They wanted me to stay, but I also said, I really want to play. I really got to do this. I got to find out, but thank you very much. This was a great experience. At the same time, when I was rehearsing the Chicago Symphony one day, I looked at my watch to see what time it was, and thought that, okay, that's weird. I'm with the Chicago Symphony, and I can't wait for rehearsal to get over. That's not a good sign at all. And I realized this must not be what I'm supposed to do. I know I can, but at that moment, I decided this cannot be the focus of my life. For some reason, it must be something else. Even though my friends in there is like, it's only a matter of time, you get a position in here. I'm like, yeah. But one thing I also learned by being in there was why I play my music was different than everybody else. I play because I have an absolute internal passion for it. It's not just about being the best in the world. And that's the people that were around me. It was about being absolutely perfect and, almost distancing yourself. And I could not detach me from my music. And you can't sustain that level of playing every day like that. It would kill you. It would have killed me. And I decided, I can't do that. And there must be something more. Going to Benedictine University opportunity, I was given an opportunity to teach one class. That led to, and I put a picture up there, finding out what this Benedictine thing was about. That picture of this icon here is Hildegard von Bingen. I blame her for everything that I do in Catholic higher education, because that first year I was there, somebody gave me a pamphlet and said it's her 900th anniversary, and she's a Benedictine liberal artist, doctor of the church. This woman was amazing, and why aren't we doing anything here about it? So everybody says, well, then do something. Okay. So I'm like just an adjunct faculty member, just going to town on this stuff and just finding out that there's money pockets. That's why I always say there's always money hiding when you just go look for it and ask. Well, we put on a $30,000 event. I did within a year because it was so important to me to share how important the liberal arts are for the church. And not only that, but a woman leader of the church. And so she was such a pillar to me in that whole experience, and also learned a lot about myself, that all the things that I kind of was doing anyway, they actually come to amazing fruition when you get an institution where things can actually blossom. I also had, when I was there, again, my love of travel never ever leaves me. And when I went to a conference performing, actually up in Wisconsin, up at Madison, Wisconsin, I heard an oboe sound that I've only heard from other place, and that was me. But I was hearing it and ringing through the hallways. I'm like, where is that coming from? Well, I found out it was coming from a room where the principal oboist of the St. Petersburg Philharmonic was playing. And it was exactly the same sound. Well, my oboe sound, I didn't try to imitate anybody. I just tried to play what I heard in my head. And here I'm hearing my sound coming from somewhere else. So I made a point of saying, can we play duets? He's like, sure. Well, we realized literally when we played, it was like one player. Identical. So, of course, I found out he wanted to do this series in Russia of best oboes in the world in St. Petersburg. I said, well, why don't you have me come? And so he goes, well, can you give me your portfolio? Absolutely. And you know what? I'll do you one better. I'll bring the oboe d'amour because it's never been done. And there was a piece, because I talk with people, there's a piece by Johann Sebastian Bach, which was my dissertation composer. And I'll be the first oboist to play that piece, first American in Russia in this program, blah, blah, blah. And about maybe 2 weeks after he left and went back home, I got a call and said, I want you to come. So I did, and we played concerts. We played 3 concertos, which is unheard of in a single concert, especially for an oboe player. And I played that oboe d'amour piece, and it was magical. It was also fun to be able to be a teacher, because I was working with the conservatory in St. Petersburg, and worked with some of their English horn players. And it was just a lot of fun watching. It's a very male-dominant field there, and oboe is considered a very male instrument there, so a lot of the students did not want to acknowledge what I was saying. So, of course, little Alicia, that little Ollie of my father, I looked at the accompanist, who was a woman, I said, do you want to do this? And she could speak any English. We just nodded. I'm like, let's play. So I played the piece for the student, who turned beet red, as did each one of his teachers, but the amount of respect I had for my ability and my own confidence actually propelled, I think, women there in that field, as well as the audience, which ended up going to the concert, which were all these people. And it was the first American to fill the auditorium, and the accolades were amazing. So much so, they brought me back again in the spring with my trio, that was oboe, bassoon, and piano. So we did recordings over there in the spring, because they wanted me to experience the White Nights. So it was amazing. So that first, I went the beginning of the year, and then I went to end that year with that series. Unbelievable experience. At the same time, my love of the faith was still always ever present. So I did a Sabbatical Project, which everybody said there's no way anybody's going to prove it. And I'm like, well, if they don't, they don't. If they do, great. But my project was to try to put my faith together with my music, together with my love of research. So this project, and it's an ongoing project. The year, I think it started in 2007. It was researching the Blessed Mother, the teachings of the Church, commissioning composers to write in her honor for my instruments, and then for me to visit 7 shrines throughout Europe and their national shrines in the United States. My goal was to show how powerful your faith can be if you put it a part of your everyday life. Because there's churches all over, and every one of the Catholic churches has a small shrine of the Blessed Mother. If you go and pray and really put her in the center, she is quite the conduit to her son, Jesus, and amazing things happen. I was going to do a book of just what these places were like and share the beauty of them, but I realized there are a lot of books that do that. But at each one of the locations, I write a diary. I keep a diary of my own experience in them. What I found out by letting somebody read some of those pages, she said, I'm going to leave now and you need to read some of your diary, because I hadn't read anything. I'm like, what are you talking about? No, I'm going to leave you by yourself because you need to read what you write. Because I don't know, I just write as it goes. Well, I read, and the voice changes. It starts out me, blah, 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 and it goes into a male or a female voice, and it's actually becomes something totally different. And basically, I take that as Jesus and Mary are using me as a conduit. And so when you actually put yourself in that full discernment space, it's truly contemplative space, and you just are present for them and with them, they become a part of you. I went to one example of a really weird phenomenon, because I didn't bring the book. I could read you some of these things, but eventually, hopefully, God decided it needs to get published. I was in Spain and went to Zaragoza. So there's a Marian shrine there, and my aunt was asking me when I was, finishing my edits, because she went with, and my daughter did, and my cousin. She says, "What are you writing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just, just some words that are, kind of a poem that I was writing. Oh, can you read it to me?" And I'm like, "Sure, but you're not going to understand it." So I started reading it to her, and she understood every single word. And she's like, "Wow, that's really beautiful. You wrote that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, "I don't understand how you can understand it." And she goes, "You're saying it in Spanish." And I looked on the page. It was written in Spanish. I'm telling you, put them in the center. Interesting things happen. Anyway, with all that going on, of course, I become a mom. I got divorced in the middle of all this stuff too, but the joy, as you can see in these pictures, was basically watching my daughter grow up. One of the reasons I love helping athletic students is because she was a volleyball player from 3rd grade all the way through high school. I still think she would have benefited by staying an athlete in college, because it's a built-in community, but that's for another story. One of the things, I traveled a lot, but I always promised her everywhere I went, if she couldn't go, I would buy her a doll and a dress from that location. So you see she's wearing a little all of her little Russian things right there. Well, she has quite a collection of China dolls, because I always, if there was a China doll, I would get one. And of course, our love of animals. And Holden, that some of you have seen, that's him as a puppy. And of course, if you notice also that Mary is directly in the center. She's always in the center. Third crisis, I guess we could say, again, I had one of the reasons I got divorced is because my marriage was literally killing me. I was so stressed out by our two viewpoints of how life should be that I ended up getting so sick. I ended up with what's called, I can't think of the name of it, but it's a precursor to cervical cancer. And if they hadn't caught it and removed it within the week that happened, I wouldn't be here today. Again, major crisis. I should have died then again, and I did not. Because God was right there in the center. But it also taught me I have to rethink priorities. I can't, just because I'm Catholic, I believe in all them, and you make sure you just deal with whatever you have. And I said, my daughter won't have a mother if I'm not careful. And I have to make this decision on her behalf, whether it's good for her or not. And sure enough, it ended up, well, you've met George, and you can take it from there. I love that guy. So speaking of, there he is. Anyway, my passion for Catholic higher education really grew at Benedictine University. And a lot of that was just by ending up going from adjunct faculty within a year, teaching a few classes, and within another year being the chair was denied tenure, so they needed a chair for an interim. So I stepped into that role, by virtue of I have a doctorate, so I was the only one who had the credentials. I love that. If you have your stuff going and you prove yourself along the way, great things happen. But they offered me the position. I was going to do it for a year until they decided what they wanted to do. They said, you're doing a good job, just stay. And part of that good job was when I became chair, the department was one vote away from being eliminated. Because the predecessor, one of the reasons he was denied tenure was because he pretty much didn't do anything to support the department. He was trying to do other things to promote himself up through the ranks. So I said, you have 1 year to flip how the school sees the department, to make it viable again, make the students happy again, get valuable faculty, and so on and so forth, and we'll reassess at the end of the year. Well, not only did it flip, but they gave me the tenure track position and the chair of the department. And we became so successful that it was originally fine arts and fine and performing arts, and both programs became so big, we ended up having to have chairs in both areas. I work hard, and I love what I do, and I love working with people. It wasn't me, it was this team of faculty and adjunct staff, all of us working together to make good things happen. But in the process, because I had always been a student and a player and just lucky things happen in the right place, the right time, I really didn't understand this concept of Catholic as it was connected to education. So I got myself on a lot of committees, and I went on a lot of reading groups to learn what that meant. The more I learned, the more I was totally enamored of the whole concept and realized, watch what it was doing to me. I watched my playing get better through my faith being central. My parenting was better. My second marriage is amazing. All these great things were happening. I want to help other people find that space because it was just so incredible if you really do it right. I was so impassioned about that I hired out all the time at other schools for quite a few years to be as a consultant. How can they build their identity and focus more on the Catholic mission with the beauty of the charism? I've talked to Board of Trustees. I've talked to, again, ABCU created a conference for them to get all 12 of their schools together talking about it. And I've created leadership programs with and for the Association for Catholic Colleges and Universities. I love Catholic higher education. And I decided that must be my vocation because I keep growing in it and all the rest of the things keep growing too. So this must be the right place. As you see, I ended up marrying just this incredible guy. He is my love of my life. When we're like yin and yang and it all over the place, it's just beautiful. And I swear God picked him for me too. I think he came up after a faculty meeting after I came back from sabbatical, and he asked me, if he could talk to me about some things. And I'm like, oh, absolutely, sure. And we're walking up to my office. Halfway up the stairs, I realized I was no longer the chair of the department. because I'd gone on sabbatical and asked to continue on as the chief mission officer. I'm like, oh dear, what does he want to talk to me about? Asked me on a date, and I was ready to say no. I was like, my life is too full. I can't do it. And I remembered when I was in Spain working on that shrine, my aunt told me, it said, you have an amazing relationship with your daughter, but someday she'll grow up and have her own life. What are you going to do? And I said to myself, I have plenty of things to do. I have so many projects that I'm never going to finish, blah, blah, blah. But that question, that little voice stayed in my head. Well, when he asked me that question, I was just about to blurt out the no. I looked at the cross in the back of my office and like, oh, you didn't already. Sure enough, that was it. So I'm telling you, God's always present. Mary's always present. My music is always present. My family's always present. But one thing I learned and my career shifted was that my morals are also very high in ethics in my professional life. And at Benedict, I love that school. I said, but there was a black cloud. And it started getting inside of me. And I couldn't change it because nobody wanted to listen. Because it was a change of dynamic, and people were eating at each other and bickering and fighting on what was important or not there. And if I was there, that meant I supported it, and I couldn't. So I took a leap of faith and started putting my name out there, talking to all the friends, all the people I learned from doing all my consulting work, and just said, I need your help. That was the first time I actually reached out to people. I need you guys, my friends. So all of that network helped them remember when St. Mary's needed somebody to come in and create something out of nothing. It was that Center for Catholic Studies. That president there knew me from the work I did with the ACCU. My name then was given to the committee, and they invited me to apply. And then when I sent my resume, the chair was like, you have so much experience. Why would you want to come here? And I couldn't say it because I got to get out of here. But I said, because I want to know, because part of it's too, I want to know if I could do anything somewhere where I don't know anybody or anything, no track record. So literally doing something for another school, for the church, for the students, for the faculty and staff in a place that, Texas for heaven's sakes, a place totally different than anywhere else. And that's why I took the leap of faith. Again, when I realized my vocation was very significant to me, and my mental health, my mental well-being was really important, and because that negativity was coming home, that I talked to my husband, can I actually do this? Can we do this? And we both agreed, I have to do this. So I went, and we did a lot. I was there for 4 years, and part of it was because the president there knew I could only be there for a short amount of time, but I also needed some skills. I will give him his vision if he helps mentor me. And one of the biggest things that I felt that was missing in my career was the ability, the experience in fundraising. I was already doing it for my departments. I would say kind of bootleg, not through advancements, but I was doing it on my own, and then bringing them things. Here, we already have this, and what could they do? Turn money away? So, so he helped me work with that system to learn how to do this. He took me in front of foundations and spoke on behalf of the institution. I was in front of the archdiocese, in front of the bishop, in front of the superintendent of Catholic schools. I was with all the major donors, and I was the one being seated at the tables with them because he knew I could take a vision, I could take an idea, and I could give it flesh. And I knew all the details from how much time it would take to how many pennies it would take and all the way down. And so I learned a lot about that in again, to hopefully one day maybe become a president. Maybe. Who knows? But again, so when I was there, I also learned again, how important friendship was and how to have families in different places. So the church became my outside professional family. As you can see, this is the cathedral. Let's see, where is it? That thing, the Cathedral of San Antonio, became my home parish there. But that happened because of this woman. I was drawn to that cathedral, not for its beauty. Everybody says, oh, it's just because it's beautiful. No, I've seen, it's a beautiful church, but I don't go to church for that. I said, I felt something there calling me there. And I found her in the back of the altar, in the former original altar of this church. And I knew it was her because she came from the Canary Islands, which is from Spain. And she reminded me again of La Semana Santa in Seville, because they're very much those kind of icons that are taken around on floats. The other little buddy of mine who helped me get through COVID, I was stuck in an apartment for 7 months. If I didn't have her, I would have never made it. I'll start tearing up. I won't talk about it too much. So I was able to do a lot of things when I was there, needless to say. But again, COVID reminded me how far I really was from home. Because for 7 months, I couldn't go home. I was stuck. And my daughter said, if you go back, because I was home, I was actually doing a lot of presentations during spring break, which is, right at the end of that. And I said, no, Peaches, my cat, I have to go back. And I have nothing. All I have is my presentation materials in a suitcase. She goes, if you go back, you're not coming back. And sure enough, she was right. Literally stuck in an apartment for 7 months because the school was shut down. That town, it was rampant with COVID illness and just horrible. So this vocational solution reminded me, yes, God is present, God is finding things, God will help you if you ask, but also that you have to know who's going to help you through it, and that family's still number one most important. Which brings me to you. I realized started getting a little antsy, and I knew I needed to leave. So I just started applying to schools while everybody was turning my resume away. Every college whether it was provost positions, dean positions, president's positions, and all the search firms would say to me, it's like, you have everything you need, but your title, they can't get over the fact you're a director of a center. And how do you do that and go directly to president? It's unheard of. So I went to the president. I said, I need a title. Just give it. I did. That's exactly what I did. It took him about 4 months to finally give me one. And he even told me, the only one who's holding me back from giving you this title. I'm like, who? Me. I said it wasn't because he was just very concerned about just giving me a title. I said, well, I'm doing all the work. And so I gave him the package. This is what I'm doing. And you know why I'm here. And I will never get out of this space if you don't help me. And you told me you would help me. Sure enough, I got that AVP title, Associate Vice President. I think a week later, I sent my application here and to another school. And both schools put me on their semifinals list. A title. That's why I don't take titles lightly, just so you know. But again, it was taking all kinds of risks, but always fighting for myself. So anyway, I think we have a few minutes I need to give you to talk. But these are kind of the kinds of things I'm noticing. Everybody's happy in my family. I'm ecstatic. One thing I've been telling people, that the interesting thing about being here with you all, which I love you all so much. I don't know if you can see that. It comes out of me all the time. But the one thing that you've given me, and I'll start crying if I think about it too much. This is the first time in my life I felt like I fit somewhere. Like all the craziness I've experienced in my entire life, which is all kind of bizarre. And I admit it, and I perpetuate the bizarre. But this is the first time I've been somewhere where I feel it's just right. Like I'm here to help others be their best selves, and I'm supposed to be here doing it, and we all are in that space together. So thank you for that. I mean, I have other slides, but you don't need to see any rest. It's just kind of great. But thank you. You are my story. You are my story. So thank you all very much.